Here's a disturbing experiment. In 2015, researchers asked people to identify which of two individuals was the actual expert in various fields. One person gave correct but hesitant answers. The other gave wrong answers with absolute certainty. Can you guess who people believed more often? The confident liar. And it wasn't even close. This reveals something deeply uncomfortable about human psychology. We are hardwired to follow confidence over correctness. The person who sounds sure of themselves will almost always beat the person who actually knows what they're talking about. And once you see this pattern, you'll notice it everywhere. In politics, in marketing, in your workplace, even in your own relationships. Today, we're diving into why your brain is essentially designed to be fooled by confidence and what you can do about it. The confidence bias. Let's start with a fundamental truth about how humans process information. We are cognitive misers. Our brains are constantly looking for shortcuts because analyzing every piece of information we encounter would be exhausting and slow. One of the most powerful shortcuts we use is what psychologists call the confidence heuristic. Essentially, when someone speaks with certainty, our brains interpret that confidence as a signal of knowledge. This made perfect sense in our evolutionary past. If someone in your tribe confidently told you which berries were poisonous, they probably knew from experience. Hesitation might mean they were unsure, and eating those berries could kill you. But here's the problem. We never evolved a mechanism to distinguish between genuine expertise and performed confidence. Our brains process them identically. When someone speaks with conviction, our neural pathways light up in ways that bypass our critical thinking. We feel persuaded before we even consciously evaluate whether what they're saying is true. Studies on courtroom testimony have shown this dramatically. When expert witnesses testify with confidence, juries find them significantly more credible than experts who express appropriate scientific uncertainty, even when the uncertain experts are actually more accurate. The witness who says, "I'm 100% certain this fingerprint matches," is more persuasive than the one who says, "There's a 95% probability of a match," even though the second statement is more scientifically honest. Now, here's where things get really interesting and really problematic. There's an inverse relationship between actual knowledge and expressed confidence. This is the famous Dunning-Kruger effect. People who know very little about a subject often have wildly inflated confidence in their opinions. Meanwhile, actual experts tend to be more hesitant because they understand the complexity and nuance involved. They see all the gray areas. They know what they don't know. Think about it. A first-year medical student might confidently diagnose your symptoms after one class. A doctor with 20 years of experience will ask follow-up questions, consider multiple possibilities, and maybe even say, "Let's run some tests to be sure." Who sounds more confident? The student. Who should you trust? Obviously, the doctor. But our brains don't naturally make that distinction. We hear confidence and we relax. We think, this person knows what they're talking about. I don't need to think as hard about this. And that's exactly when we're most vulnerable to being misled. This creates a perverse dynamic in society. The people least qualified to speak on a topic often speak the loudest and with the most certainty, while the people most qualified hedge their statements with appropriate caveats. And the crowd usually follows the confident fool. Why confidence spreads? Confidence isn't just persuasive in the moment, it's contagious and self-reinforcing. When someone states something confidently, they trigger what researchers call social proof. If they seem certain, other people assume they must have good reasons for that certainty. Those people then repeat the claim, often with similar confidence, because they heard it from a confident source. Before long, you have a cascade effect where a confidently stated falsehood becomes widespread belief. We saw this play out dramatically with medical misinformation during the pandemic. Confident claims spread faster than careful, nuanced expert guidance, even when those claims were demonstrably false. Why? Because confidence is memorable, shareable, and doesn't require the audience to think hard. Social media has supercharged this effect. Platforms reward engagement, and nothing drives engagement like confident, provocative statements. A tweet that says, "This one thing is destroying your health," will always outperform one that says, "The relationship between this factor and health outcomes is complex and depends on multiple variables." The algorithm doesn't care about truth, it cares about clicks, and confidence gets clicks. Here's the really insidious part. Once someone has publicly committed to a confident position, they become psychologically invested in defending it. Admitting uncertainty or error would mean losing face, so they double down. Their confidence becomes armor against facts. Real-world consequences. The confidence over truth bias isn't just an interesting psychological quirk, it has profound real-world consequences. In business, confidently wrong leaders often rise faster than competent but modest ones. They pitch ideas with certainty, even when those ideas are flawed. Boards and investors mistake their confidence for vision. By the time reality proves them wrong, they've often moved on to the next opportunity, leaving others to clean up the mess. In politics, we consistently elect confident speakers over knowledgeable policymakers. A candidate who can deliver a simple, confident message will usually beat one who acknowledges complexity and trade-offs. We vote for certainty even when the problems we face have no certain solutions. In relationships, confident manipulation often defeats honest vulnerability. The person who confidently asserts you're being crazy can make you doubt your own perceptions, even when you're right. Gaslighting works because confidence can override your internal sense of truth. And even in science, confident but flawed research often gets more attention than careful, measured work. Flashy claims published with certainty generate headlines. Rigorous studies with tentative findings get buried in journals. The result is a distorted public understanding of how science actually works. And perhaps most concerning, in an age of information overload, we're all increasingly susceptible to this bias. We don't have time to fact-check everything, so we rely more heavily on confidence as a proxy for truth. We're outsourcing our critical thinking to whoever sounds most certain. How to protect yourself. So what do you do with this information? How do you avoid being fooled by confidence? First, train yourself to notice confidence as a red flag, not a green light. When someone speaks with absolute certainty on a complex topic, that should trigger skepticism, not trust. Ask yourself, what would it take for them to admit they're wrong? If the answer is probably nothing, be very cautious. Second, actively seek out the hesitant experts. Look for people who say things like, "the evidence suggests," or "in most cases," or "it's complicated." These qualifiers aren't weakness, they're signs of intellectual honesty. The person who acknowledges uncertainty about some things is more trustworthy about everything. Third, separate confidence from competence in your own mind. Before you believe or share something, ask, what is this based on? Not how certain does this person seem, but what evidence supports this claim. Train yourself to tolerate uncertainty. The most honest answer to many questions is, "we don't know yet," or "it depends." Fourth, be aware of your own confidence bias. Notice when you're more persuaded by how something is said than by what is actually being said. We all do this. The goal isn't to eliminate the bias, it's probably hardwired, but to recognize it in action and compensate for it. And finally, reward appropriate uncertainty in others. When someone says, "I'm not sure," or "I need to think about that," or "I could be wrong," recognize that as intellectual strength, not weakness. We need to collectively shift the culture away from rewarding false certainty. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Confidence will probably always be more immediately persuasive than actual truth. That's just how our brains work. We can't rewire millions of years of evolution, but we can become aware of this bias. We can train ourselves to notice when we're being swayed by style over substance. We can actively seek out people who express appropriate doubt and complexity, and we can stop rewarding those who mistake certainty for knowledge. The next time someone tries to persuade you of something, whether it's a politician, a YouTuber, a coworker, or even a friend, pay attention to how much certainty they project. Ask yourself, is this certainty earned or is it a performance? Are they genuinely knowledgeable or are they simply good at sounding like they are? Because the person who admits "I don't know" about some things is far more trustworthy than the person who claims to have all the answers. In a world drowning in confident nonsense, intellectual humility might be the most radical act of all. Be skeptical of certainty, question confidence, and remember, the loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. If this video made you think differently about how you evaluate information, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into how your brain works and how to think more clearly in a world designed to manipulate you. And drop a comment. What's an example you've seen where confidence won over truth?